culture, but it's something that we begin to understand when it's explained to us, when we start thinking about it and chanting the holy name, and Krishna very kindly reveals himself. And you can't help but fall in love with him. When you know, whatever may be your background in terms of your upbringing in whichever country and so on. But Krishna is such an attractive personality that the moment we start serving him, we start hearing about him, we spontaneously get attracted to him. So even though it is indeed far out, but when you hear about him in the association of devotees, very quickly it becomes very comfortable. Then you're not anymore at unease with the concept, with the idea. It's just because we haven't heard of it from childhood. But there's so many things we haven't heard about since childhood. But eventually we learn, we come to terms with these things. We get knowledge. So therefore with this A, B, C, D, E formula, then it will become something very familiar and not so far out. Alright? Yes?
Alright, one of the biggest ideological difficulties people have with the idea of God, particularly in the Western world, is how does he allow so much horrible stuff to go on? They can't reconcile loving and powerful and omniscient with being a bystander. So could you say something on that?
Okay, I'll repeat the question because of the recording, I suppose it's recorded. Your question is that people who can't reconcile the apparently opposing ideas of a loving God with so much of misfortune that happens in terms of killing or deaths or unhappiness that goes on in this world. This indeed is one of the oldest philosophical and theological dilemmas that have confronted humanity. And different theologians and philosophers have grappled with this idea of this contradiction. When you study Krishna consciousness, however, these things are resolved very beautifully. It would take a little while to explain it elaborately, but let me try to be as concise as possible. I'll speak bullet points to make the answer short and hopefully sweet. Number one, we are not this body. We are the eternal spirit souls. Number two, Krishna is the eternal supreme personality of Godhead, the eternal supreme soul. Number three, there is a relationship of love between the eternal soul and the eternal supreme personality of Godhead Krishna. So it's an eternal relationship of love. There are certain souls who, being endowed with free will, because they're part and parcel of Krishna, choose to not love him. They have that freedom, that choice. Because love cannot happen without free will. Love cannot be forced. You can't hold a gun to somebody's head and say, love me. Well, you could, but it won't be genuine love. So Krishna also doesn't want to force us to love him, although he's all-powerful. And he says, alright, if you don't want to love me, what do you want to do? You want to be an independent enjoyer? Alright, I have this material world for you. Go out and try to, this is our Disneyland. This material world is our fantasy land, Disneyland, where we've come here with all sorts of fantasies of trying to be the enjoyers and conquerors and so on and so forth. And Krishna says, look, this is not the place for you to be in. If you want to be there, then this is the result. You're going to have to face the consequences of the laws here. If you come back to me, then you can live a happy life. Just as the country, let's say in Australia, you have the freedom as citizens living there to do so many things. But if you violate the laws of the state, then the state is obliged or compelled to imprison the person who does that. It's not that the government is full of cruel people who just want to punish the citizens. It's not like that. But in order to have peace and order for the rest of the citizens who are law-abiding, a few people who are criminals need to be confined in premises where they will not cause a disturbance to the others. And then the government says, look, you can do anything you like. You have the choice to accept a profession of a teacher, a doctor, lawyer, whatever. But then we can't accept the profession of a thief or a murderer or something like that. If you do that, then the state says, all right, no, then the jail is another place for you. So in the jail, there are different rules that apply. It's not a cruel president or a prime minister or a king. It's just that it's a different set of rules in a jail. And the person is there in the jail in the first place because of the misuse of his free will. So this material world is like that. It's like a jail. So we are all here. Sorry to say that, but we are all criminals. That's why we are all here in this material world. We didn't want to serve Krishna. We wanted to enjoy separately from Krishna. So Krishna says, all right, if that's what you want, then here I have this prison house for you. But it's a very difficult place to be in. The laws are really tough. You have to accept a material body. And then there's so many difficulties that come one after the other, miseries. So Krishna has given us a choice. Fundamentally, it's not Krishna's problem, it is our problem. We chose wrongly. And number two, we continue to choose wrongly. And therefore we have to bear the results of our actions. So therefore Krishna is not to blame. Nothing happens without a cause in this world, isn't it? Everything has a cause. So if I'm experiencing some happiness, there's a cause. If I'm experiencing some distress, there's a cause. I may not know what the cause is, but at least I should know that there is a cause. Nothing happens by chance. The only alternative to believing in God is to believe there is no God. And to believe there is no God means that you think everything happened by chance. But chance is not a cause. Chance is merely the expression of our ignorance of the cause. Because I don't know why something happens, I say, oh, by chance it happened. Right? So therefore in this world, people act in certain ways and they have to face the reactions of that. However pleasant or unpleasant that may be, and this goes on as a cycle. This is called the cycle of karma, which eventually leads to the cycle of birth and death. So Krishna is not to blame. He is always trying to help us from within and from without. From within as a super soul, the Lord in the heart, and from without as the devotees of Krishna, as the devotees of God in different religions across the world, in the form of the holy books of the world. So if we pay heed to these books and lead a godly life, a genuinely spiritual life, not just a flag bearer of a religion, but a genuinely spiritual life, then we tune our desires and interests with that of the Lord, with Krishna. We are like rusted iron filings who don't align with the north and south pole of the magnet. But when you scrape off the rust, then the iron filings immediately attach themselves to the magnet, or they align themselves at the very least. So our goal of life is to voluntarily align ourselves to the will of Krishna, and we become happy. That's the source of happiness. The moment we have some rust, lust, greed, pride, etc., then the covering keeps us away from Krishna, keeps us away from that divine love and bliss. So actually we are responsible, not Krishna. Krishna facilitates that. Whatever our desires may be good or bad. So ultimately the responsibility rests with the individual. So we cannot actually blame God or even nature for that. Yes, I know it wasn't a brief answer. I started off with a brief, hoping to give a brief answer, but that's somewhat an explanation. Okay? Yashodev, do we have time for a question or two more?
Sure.
Sure, okay. Yes.
In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to fight in a war.
Yes.
I was wondering, does that mean that Krishna is asking about the direction this world is heading? Even though it's not everything like you said, does Krishna care what we do in this world, and if we stand up, what is right?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Yes, we've been talking about inner battlefields, and I've been speaking not too highly about the external battlefields. So Arjuna was fighting a battle and Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita on the battlefield. But it's interesting that Krishna's sermon to Arjuna on the external battlefield was more about the conquest of the inner battlefield than the external battlefield. External battlefield, he said, well, Arjuna, anyway, I've defeated your enemies. Don't worry about that. Just be my instrument. Act according to my instructions. Victory is already yours because you're my devotee. I've already conquered these people. Now I'm more concerned about you conquering your inner self. So he used the external battlefield as a pretext for giving knowledge about the conquest of the inner battlefield. And that's the real significance of that. At the same time, there is a practical dimension to it as well. Because as we live in this world, it's not only godly people who live here, as I mentioned earlier on, we have all kinds of people. And many times people unjustly try to impose their ideologies upon us forcefully. Or they interfere in our lives in a very forceful way, or they try to exploit others. So yes, we have a right and a duty to defend ourselves. So the Bhagavad Gita is not merely a book that talks about unconditional non-violence. It does accept the necessity of violence in this world, but conditionally, not unconditionally. It's only for the sake of protection or for a higher purpose. Not for the sake of ego, greed, lust, anger, pride, illusion, not for that. But for the higher purposes, if sometimes one may need to do that. For example, the Pandavas, the 5 brothers, were deprived of their kingdom wrongfully by their cousins. Draupadi was molested publicly in a courtroom, and the cousins, the Kauravas, tried to kill the Pandavas in many ways. There was injustice galore, attempts at exploitation galore, and Krishna eventually wanted a righteous king like the eldest of the Pandavas, Yudhishthira, to rule the world. So he orchestrated this battle. So, in Krishna consciousness, we recognize the need for the world to be governed in a certain way. We also recognize that sometimes violence is a necessity, but basically the devotee is a non-violent person. The devotee doesn't want to use violence at all. The devotee may be compelled to use violence as a very last resort. But even then with the understanding that it's for a higher purpose. That requires a lot of spiritual maturity. It needs a high degree of Krishna consciousness to be able to judge when to use it and when not to use it. But generally, devotees wouldn't use it. Arjuna's circumstances were very unusual and extraordinary. So we have a right and duty to protect ourselves, and that's when we can use violence if push comes to shove, as they say. Right? Does that answer your question? Okay. One last question if there is.
I just ask
quickly?
Yes.
Because we still have to live in this world and still work and, you know, have a house and if you're going to have a family and children, and how do we balance everything and still have this ultimate goal? Because obviously I'd love to just follow this only, but as we do have to live here and all the implications that has.
Okay, your question is that how do we follow the path of Krishna consciousness if we have to live in this world and then maybe have a family and so on and so forth? The two are not contradictory or mutually exclusive. It doesn't mean that if you have to do Krishna consciousness, you can't live in the world. It doesn't mean that you can't have a family and so on. You can do all of these things. However, even though we may live in this world, but we should not be of this world. There's a distinction here. Living in the world is something we don't have a choice about. We have to live. We have to survive, so we have to live in this world. And most of you work in jobs, you have a business or something, so you have to live in this world for your survival. But you need not be of this world, meaning that you don't have to be like other people in this world in terms of your internal convictions, in terms of the lifestyle you lead, your aspirations and goals in life. You don't have to be like other people in terms of the things they find pleasure in. You need not be with them when they go drinking to a pub or when they do other things which are not in accordance with Krishna consciousness, which are not good for development of our spiritual life. So we can live in the world but not be of the world. And for that we really need this A, B, C, D and the E also. Because that ecstasy will keep you inoculated from the different temptations and distractions and troubles of the modern day world outside. So you can live in the outside world and still continue actively practicing Krishna consciousness. Okay? Alright, so Yashodev, what's your instruction for me now? We should stop?
If you allow me to give you an instruction, Maharaj, then I would kindly request that next time you're in Sydney, please come back here to the ashram again.
Yes, I
Actually,
will.
I think I forget.
That's a promise, I will.
Thank you very much. We'll have dinner now, as we usually do. I'm wondering, Maharaj, if you're in a rush to go, or if perhaps you could stay around a while and some persons could ask some more questions if they like. Or
I'm around for a while.
if you're free, okay. So then please everyone take advantage of the opportunity to ask him some more questions in private, so to speak. We'll have dinner. I think most of you know how it works. There could really use some volunteers in the kitchen to help serve and to help clean as usual. It means a lot to us. But before we eat, I'd just like to ask everybody to again, please, give a big round of applause to Bhakti RASAMRITA SWAMI. I can see it's really touched a lot of hearts tonight, so thank you so much, Maharj.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for being a wonderful audience. And you know what? I didn't see a single person sleeping. I usually put a lot of people to sleep in my lectures. Goes to show, the credit goes to you. It's a good audience. Hare Krishna. Thank you.